Hello and welcome to this global AI session on GitHub Copilot Dev Days. And thanks for joining and welcome, Alex. Welcome, Matthias. Happy you are here and joining us live on stage. We are now here for the next 3 hours to speak with you about GitHub Copilot. It's really cool. But first, perhaps on the first few minutes, we have to set up the stage and what is the global AI community. Somehow that is the biggest AI community worldwide right now. We started in 2018. We have done already more than 4,600 events since then. And we have a lot of groups and meetups connected, more than 180 and a lot of people, 160K already worldwide, who are doing events like this in person or also in digital way, just live streaming one kind of topic. Yesterday, perhaps, you have seen this one. We will talk about robotics. Today, we're talking about development. Perhaps in 2 weeks, we have another option to speak. And this is really cool. And I have one call to action for you. You see a lot of chapters here. So Berlin, Cologne, Bochum, Karlsruhe, Munich, Nuremberg, Würzburg, some of them from Germany. We have also one in Switzerland, in Zurich. We have in Vienna, also one in Austria. Really cool on this. And we talked also with Matthias about Düsseldorf somehow, but perhaps
maybe in the future.
some days in the future, we get also one from Düsseldorf. And the call to action is just check the global AI community, the website. You find there a lot of events. You find there a lot of information, what is happening around the world. And be one of us, learn more about AI, meet, find, join your chapter. If there is no chapter in your city, you're welcome to become active, to get involved and also grow on your knowledge, but also become a leader and start your own chapter. So that is somehow the stage. And for the first half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, we will see how long we will take this one. We're just talking about the AI and development and software engineering. And what is the most famous or favorite or interesting question what you were getting from the people if you are talking about GitHub Copilot, guys?
Yeah, so I guess the most important question, or the question that was asked the most is, do we still need developers? Can everything be done by robots or by agentic AI? Do we just need to have the idea of what we want to have implemented? Why do we need to have coders at all anymore if the AI can do it? I think this is the one that came up the most in the last couple of months. And to give a very quick answer is we still need them, but maybe Alex, you have an idea why we still need them.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the questions. I also sometimes get the question with what you can do that you don't produce AI slop. I think this is also what comes up now. Yeah, but regarding if we still, I in general think we still need people that build software. But the question is, yeah, do we still work with Scrum and with all the different roles that we have? That you have someone is an expert at backend, someone expert with business. I believe what will happen is a bit like how startups work, that roles will merge, that designers, you also see now that designers can use AI to produce prototypes fast. And also developers, maybe they will now be more involved into the business part, because the writing code itself maybe doesn't take so much time anymore, because once you know how to use Copilot, you save much time. So I think the roles will change. So I believe the generalists will be more important, and also people that have high agency. If you are one of them, you still have a nice time and have good changes that you still have a job. But if you just don't care about anything, you just want to write code, you don't want to talk with customers, then it can be a bit tricky, I guess.
So I agree on this one. The role will change, of course, because you will see already that the processes are different. You're quicker, and you can do a lot of things. You will need perhaps 3 people. Now you can do it alone somehow. But since I was also at KIT 10 years ago, and we have teach people how to do software engineering, and we build or we develop with a team of students prototypes, and that is somehow really tricky. If I remember this 10 years ago, I would have these tools right now, and I would say, hey, your idea is right now to implement a website and to show me something on this website and to do something on this, just some simple task. I think that will be ready not even in 5 minutes. So if you know what exactly you want to do, what was Alex was saying already, that was really true. If you have this prompt, now it's easy. But I think what you need first, of course, is the people who understands what is the requirement, how to write it down, because everyone hates this. So to write requirements and
It's
to
very
do all
important,
of this implementation. So you still need someone in the loop who is doing this. Okay, you can do this incremental, of course, with your Copilot right now, saying, okay, I need a website. Okay, what do you want on this website? I need a login and so on. So it could be different tasks somehow. But if I would right now teach software engineering, I would not give them this kind of tasks. I would say, okay, you're allowed to do AI, you're allowed to use GitHub Copilot, but then explain to myself why is it right what GitHub Copilot was doing there. Because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, as you were studying computer science, we were all on the forums searching for a solution to something we will find as a bug.
Yeah, and sometimes it took days to come up with a solution, and now it's just like one prompt away. It's totally different. I mean, if for me, it was like 15 years ago when I had my first computer science lecture in the university, and I still had to write stuff like assembler by hand, do some stuff in C and so on. So I definitely learned the basics, and if I see how it might be taught now, with all the availability of Copilot, Claude, and all this agentic AI stuff, or even LLMs, ChatGPT, etc., I guess it's another approach, or you need to have another approach to teach the knowledge of programming, because you said you would give them different tasks to do, like write a website. If this is something that you just enter into the prompt, you might see the result, but you don't actually learn how to do it by hand. And this is something that is very important. Just I think this is like one of the gaps between a junior developer and a senior developer. And if we ask ourselves the questions, do we still need developers? It's very difficult to answer. I mean, the obvious answer is yes, but there are different skill levels, and we still need to take care of the junior developers and how they can actually learn stuff. And there's also one thing, or in the past, I was able to judge someone's results based on the code they produced, and I knew what they were capable of doing by hand. If I see a solution now, I'm not really sure who actually made this solution. So, I mean, for the business, it's a good idea because we still have this solution that is probably working. And I think later on, we'll talk about quality assurance and stuff, and things like, should we just accept everything that the AI outputted, or what kind of review processes should we have there? But it's, for me, it's difficult to judge if somebody actually knows what the solution is doing, or if the solution is just working. And the good idea to like share knowledge and like have juniors grow into seniors, or mid-level developers and seniors, is to, I don't know, I need to like know their progression, but this is difficult for me now. Maybe this will be different in the future, but it is difficult now.
And what I also think is you still need developers who have taste, because if you have a new project, then I'm more of a Vue developer, and I'm always a fan of testing, front-end testing. And I noticed if you just say to the AI, please write me tests, that the tests are bad. It tests implementation details. My guess is that it was trained on so many bad tests that the default state is that it has no idea what makes a good testing strategy. But once you take the time, maybe write down, markdown document, anything, and you explain how a good test structure should look, then it's easy for the AI to adapt. But a junior developer yeah, how does he get the taste? How does he get the experience to know when something is a good test or not? This is then tricky. So is it, do you have to write code by hand for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years? And then you also have a good taste, or yeah, do we don't have to do it? That's a tricky question.
I think there's a similarity between the question, do you need to go to the university in order to be a good programmer or not? Like, are the fundamentals that are taught in the university important or not? Like stuff like sorting algorithms and so on. And what is, how does complexity look like if you have nested loops, you have a quadratic complexity and stuff like this. I think there are a lot of similarities there. And regarding the test, this is something actually that I tested on a project. I started with 0 test coverage in this project because I never had time, unfortunately. And over the last couple of months, I only got to like 100 tests. All of them were generated by the AI, but it wasn't that my prompt was like, please write tests. I instructed the AI to do stuff like, here's the database backup, download it, start up a Docker container, create a couple of elements as an administrator, then switch to the front-end user and perform a number of clicks. And this is the expected behavior. And I was always like, okay, now I want to test this little feature. And I think there should be 6 test cases. Please analyze the code. What do you think about these 6? Do I need more? Do I need less? And then we always discuss and come up with things like, okay, this is the testing plan that should be implemented. So this is something where AI is helping me in terms of what I want to have tested. But now the next step is, are the tests, the way that they're described, actually implemented correctly? There are a couple of instances from the test that I wrote where the test passed, and I was like, wait a minute, this can't even pass because there's something that I did not implement, or there's a bug. What did you actually test? So even though I'm able to like review the test in terms of seeing like Playwright doing all the steps, select something from an input, press enter, see if there's an error message popping up or something, I'm actually still not trusting the AI enough. I mean, I have to like manually check all these tests, and it went so far that I said, for every input that you make, please save a screenshot for me so that I can like visually see what did the test actually do and was it stuck or not. And I mean, overall, I think it's better. I mean, I'm lazy, but I somehow still trust the tests now.
Yeah.
But if I add new tests, I still don't trust them for a couple of weeks, so to say, basically. And I think I had this one scenario where I refactored something, and I already had 8 existing tests, and I said, okay, there are a couple new scenarios, please add these tests. And I think for a half an hour we discussed how many tests do we need, why are you replacing the existing ones, please for each test outline what is this test actually testing, is it the same as the other ones. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely faster than writing them myself, but I can't imagine to say, dear GitHub Copilot, dear Claude, or whatever, please write a complete test documentation. And this is for brownfield, so for existing projects.
Yeah. I like also the idea that you said, okay, I don't trust this system completely, because if you follow the Microsoft AI tour right now in several cities, Munich, also in Paris and so on, they're all saying, okay, there are 2 different things, trust and intelligence. And if you have something on AI in your application, you need also to work on the trust somehow. And if you see this one, Hardware Business Review, how people are really using GenAI in 2025, what I like here to show is not about therapy or whatever, not even in last year or 2 years ago, 2024, it was generative ideas. So you get some ideas what to do and so on. What you see from the last year, the creativity is going up, improving code for developers, for professionals is going from 19 to 8, and also generating code for developers is going for 47, I'm sorry, to 5. So you see that is a huge gap from the year 2024 to the last year, if we are talking just about development. So the trust, and this is what I like a lot, Matthias, thanks for this one to coming on this. wasn't not there for developers, I think, or to doing with AI, because also 10 years ago, 20 years ago, during the whole PhD, before ChatGPT was there, we were the whole time we're asked, why do you want to code with your natural language? Because they say, hey, there are developers, they can just program this, that is deterministical because it's algorithm somehow, and then the system is working great or working well if your testing, if your quality assurance is there, and so on. So you do not have this something on like variables or like behavior that you do not have in a deterministical way. Like AI is right now is acting. If you write the same prompt to this about same idea, you get several solutions somehow. And then to figure out which of solution is right or wrong, it's also about testing. It's not only about, of course, improving code. Also, can you move from legacy code? With GitHub Copilot is also something what we see a lot, what the people needs to do in the back of the last years, because your code is legacy, you need to upgrade your .NET framework or whatever. And I like also later in a few minutes, Matthias will do Visual Studio, Alex will do Visual Studio Code. So we have two different IDEs and they can discuss and see different solutions somehow. But if we are going to see these top Gen AI use cases, what do you think on this? Are you agree?
There are two things that are not personally for me because I'm married. So things like therapy and companionship and finding purpose, that's already there. but organizing a life, or I mean, it depends if therapy is just like what kind of therapy? Do you have like mental problems?
Skip this one. I'm talking only about coding. I'm talking only about
coding. Okay, because one small detour. I've been taking up jogging for the last 3 months, and I usually always had knee pain. And what I did was I used ChatGPT, and after every running session, I put in all my training data, like my heart rate and stuff, and it was like a mentorship that was able to figure out how to get better at running and how to not overpace and stuff. So this was actually something that has worked quite well for me. And one problem that I had in the past with Gen AI was that I was not creative enough to think of how or when can I actually use Gen AI, because due to my university background, I was always thinking this is not a use case for AI. It can't solve it. But this is something that I'm maybe talking about later in my talk, is that when it comes to code as well, that I was thinking, maybe this is too difficult for code. And now I'm just like, okay, let's just try it out. And the worst case that can happen is when I'm describing a feature, and we were talking about requirements earlier, is that if I discuss something with the AI and the implementation is bad, but maybe I can still like use the refined requirements. And this is something that worked very well for me, especially also for getting to know other ones' code bases in terms of, please tell me, is like writing prompts from stuff like, do we use this sort of approach in this method or in this project, or please explain what this process is looking like. And over the last couple of months, I learned that it just got way better and better. So sometimes I'm instead of looking up something myself, I'm even writing a prompt and say, please look this up for me. And then I verify later on. But it's very amazing what Gen AI can do right now in 2026, and I'm not afraid what it's going to be in like 1 or 2 years. But I don't think that I will be jobless, but it's definitely a change, and a change that the developers need to adapt, I think.
Yeah, and I agree. They're so good for coding because you can verify if code works. So if I would tell AI, please write the next Harry Potter, and I want to be rich, it can copy paste how the writing from a book like Harry Potter is, but it can't really come up with something completely new. But for coding, you have tests, you also have compilers, so you can verify. Even if LLMs are non-deterministic, coding is something that you can verify. Yeah, if you use TypeScript, at last it will compile. If you have good tests, you also know that it will work. That's why we see that LLMs are at the moment the best use case for coding. And once coding works, you can also do other things. Yeah, and of course, and this why probably still something like finding purpose or generating ideas is much higher because the majority of people are not software developers. But yeah, it's perfect for coding. Not so good for other cases. And also, at the moment, you also can't just say to AI, just create the next unicorn. I want to be rich. Yeah, so I agree with it makes sense for me.
Okay, if we are talking about developers somehow, also what I see here is fun and nonsense is still there. Okay, you can do a lot of funny things with AI somehow and to be creative and doing the whole stuff. What I see also in our company here, also on the people from the community, that we're moving from, okay, I can try this one, also asking something like, hey, I need a summary for event, I need summary for something, for the website text or something like this. And they just try, they see that the AI is doing their work, and that's it. But if we are talking about quality, how can we measure the quality if we get something like a text? You were saying on the GitHub Copilot, you writing code and then you test this code. If we are going a little bit in general from the GitHub Copilot, I'm going to produce some PowerPoint, some text, something like summary. Who can get this quality for these tasks? Or where do we get the quality?
Yeah, it's very difficult to come up with metrics that actually measure things like how relatable or how good does a summary like summarize the whole text. A buddy of mine in university actually did his whole PhD on it, and it wasn't that easy to come up with solutions because there's always some kind of subjectivity in it when it comes to like normal text. For instance, you can have a long text, let's say 10 pages, and you generate a couple of summaries that are a half page long, and you give them to 50 people. And I guess there's still like a variance. Some people say this is good, this is bad. So it's not like every person will agree that it is a good summary. I think it is easy to find a bad summary, or if somebody like wrote the summary by hand and only summarized like the first page and there's content missing if you compare the summaries. But it is difficult, I think, for me to say, is it a good text or is it a bad text? When it comes to programming, I mean, there are some metrics that are objective in terms of how complex is your code. There's like what is it, cyclomatic complexity, I think, is it called, or something like that. And but even these metrics are like, how many different things should a function do when you need sub functions that call each other and so on. For me, there's a lot of gut feeling in terms of how does it actually feel like, if it's good or bad. I don't know what you think, but it's very difficult to come up with something that works for all, that is objective.
What I was trying to mention is, if you're getting whatever one class and you write one test, and the test is going to see if it's working or not, it's not a measure on the quality of coding somehow, because it can be spaghetti code.
Yep.
It can be really great coding. You can do whatever object-oriented programming there and do a lot of things right somehow. But at the end, if you're running the test, it does not measure the quality. It's just saying binary, 0 or 1. So working or not. It also depends on your test somehow, what you are testing. You can just test, okay, I get a function, and then the function should give me true. Is it getting true? Okay, that's it. But you do not look inside. What you need, and also, when Matthias, what you were saying earlier, based on your experience, what machine and AI and LLMs and GitHub Copilot does not have is experience. It just learned from good or bad coding. And then you ask something like, okay, give me a function here, and then you get your codes, live codes, whatever, 5, 6, 100 line of codes. And then it's great that you get this one, but if you have some experience, then you perhaps go, what typically people are doing, you throw away 50% of this one because you think, okay, I have done this already and that is great starting point, but then 50% of these lines of code are not necessary perhaps, or whatever. Yeah. But if you're going for junior developers right now, so I have to teach people software engineering. They don't know that they do not have this experience, what they have done already, what is working. What we were doing at KIT as we were learning during the computer science study, we got enough time to make our mistakes also in the exams, and also learn step by step, or to be on this journey for years on learning coding. So where you build your experience somehow. So right now, if you get the AI on the students, then they need somehow, and what I've heard also from schools and universities already, what they are trying, if you get some homework, they do not get homework what you can solve with AI. So it should be like a task that you can only solve if you are in school, and then you see how the people are working on your solution somehow. Just to be sure here, but also from this perspective, yeah, testing is one, but there's also risks on compliance and security stuff, like where do you have your coding? Alex was saying earlier already, copy paste. So plagiates, for example. So you copy someone else code, and then perhaps you are doing this as a professional. So you sell this software to someone else. What do you think about this one? So if you're working with GitHub Copilot on your projects in your companies, that is a tricky system, I think.
No, actually it's not, because this is something that GitHub Copilot has thought about in detail. And if you're using like the enterprise versions or the business ones, you have this thing like IP indemnity, I think it's called, intellectual property, and you can turn it on, and what it does is that when the code is being outputted from GitHub Copilot, it goes through another filter, and it's, for instance, being compared to code that is publicly available on GitHub under licenses like Apache license or something that can't be like remixed into your own proprietary code. And Microsoft said, I'm not sure how long this is going to hold up, but they said something like they don't take ownership of the code, but if you're being sued by someone saying the code that was generated by GitHub Copilot is violating our intellectual property, we will defend you in court, and we will pay for the court fees and the lawyers. At least this was what they said 2 months ago. I'm not sure if they're still that confident. But if you turn this IP identity feature on, and you can trust that Microsoft will defend you in court if you're being sued, I think that's a good one. But still, blindly trusting is. But I mean, it's if you copy code from Stack Overflow, okay, there you have the license for the you can copy it, but you have the license because when you publish an answer, and if it's your own answer, then you are giving the rights away. The problem is, I think, if somebody steals code and pastes it on Stack Overflow, and it's being like not his original submission, but from somebody else, you might still have a problem. But yeah, I think with this IP indemnity feature, that's actually something very smart.
That's a nice idea. So Alex, what do you think about this one? Would it be the same next year, or would it be moving on whatever generative code would be the third place or second?
I think more people that never. I think OpenClaw is a good example that when you look up the pull requests, more people that never written any code had the first pull request because of OpenClaw. Of course, it's oftentimes a bit slow, but I still like it that more people who would be afraid to do anything regarding coding now have the chance to do something with it. I think this will happen. Maybe you have a problem and there is no app for you because it would be not worth for a company to make money. Now, if you have invest a little bit of time, you can create your own app that solves your specific problem. And that's why I think it will increase.
So you would saying for pros and for end users, so for non-developers, it would be two different ways somehow also to get more in this productivity.
We will see more people who try to make money with software who have never written any code in their life before. I think there are also platforms out there to help you with that, but I think the tools will just get better and better. And of course, they still have security problems and so on, but I think coding itself will be, people will use it more. And maybe they will also learn something because they start with using VS Code Copilot and they want to build their own app. You can also ask questions. You can also say, you are my teacher, and they can use that to learn coding maybe. And this would be, I think, a good idea because you can build cool things with it. So I think this will improve, increase. I also think there will be some things that maybe not so positive regarding Gen AI. OpenAI had the problem with models that they change it because if you have a problem and you write to a chatbot, you also don't want something that just encourage you to do something bad. So this is also tricky. So but for coding, I see that it will increase.
As enhances learning, we have already on the 4th place. I think never stop learning somehow. If there's some information already written somewhere in the world, you have this one through the LLM, you can just mention, you will find this answer, and you will find a better quality somehow, also better structure and so on. So what I also think that how we learn and how we teach also students or the youngest also will change, because you will also have to include AI or some AI tools in your school, in your studies, or during the lecture and so on, because the people would already somehow accept the AI already, and also they would want you to teach them how to use. So if you are going for software engineering and want to teach the people, I think that would not work what I've done 50 years ago right now. So it should be a little bit different mindset, how the people would act somehow.
Definitely, yeah.
What I often do regarding learning is I clone open source projects. For example, I wanted to understand how Excalibur works. Excalibur is an application when you can draw rectangles and so on. And I cloned it, and then I use Copilot and ask it questions. So how does it work? Tell me in the code. And I also created a skill, but I will talk about skills also later in my session. I call it walkthrough, and the idea is it will generate an HTML with diagrams and explains to me how the code flows in an interactive way, because my brain needs diagrams to understand something. And
not only your brain.
Okay, happy to hear it. But this helps because it's most of the time the open source projects, they don't have really good documentation. But if you have the source code, you can ask questions, and then you can also read the code, and it helps much to understand how something works.
Since we have built already in June this year, that is the last time I show this slide, because there was a session. You can just going here for Microsoft Build 2025. What GitHub Copilot is using great is somehow continuous also learning from your feedback. So something like, okay, you get your user input, you get your context, it understands, it generates, and then it's re-ranked somehow suggestion and redefined somehow how to use this one. And what you were saying already is completely true. So what we see also, Francis, thank you for this one. I quite agree. Non-developers are getting more integrated into code bases and contributing codes without any prior experience. That is really cool somehow. But what I see, perhaps also to add here, if the end users, every single person would build similar apps, that is somehow perhaps also a problem what we see on as experience on agents on Microsoft 365 side, because Microsoft was first pushing the copilots there, and then you create whatever you want. And right now they implemented Agents 365 just to get on a compliance level. If every single person in my company would create the similar agent for learning, perhaps, then we have several agents, and then every single user is allowed to use them. It is an old way somehow. They changed this at the Ignite last year. So this is something what I'm perhaps also need there. So not every single person is creating the same. So we have something like, okay, you created this for your own, but if you want to share, then there should be a control pane for this one. Then you have some security compliance, some certifications, and then you are ready to go, like a marketplace, whatever. But from the idea that the people can create whatever they want, I like this a lot, of course. But then we need more on regulation stuff then also. But this is a great idea, because Matthias was already saying, I will tell this one later in my session. Alex was also saying about skills. I will talk about this one in my session. So perhaps we can also move on if you like. Thank you for the discussion. And we are ready to go somehow to go with Matthias with GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio. AI is a pair programmer and best practice.
Yeah, definitely. Let me try to figure out which screen I'm using, because this is a downside of using agentic AI. I had to get a 4th monitor, and now I'm totally confused with 3 weren't enough anymore. I had to get a special one just because I had so many things, like 5 projects at once and so on. So
that is a big problem. You remember what we started 20 years ago with 1 monitor. Now we have 2. Now we have 4. But you still have to share your screen, and if we see your screen, we are ready to go.
If I can find it, yeah. So which monitor is it? I think it's the right one, Alex?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio, because Visual Studio is the IDE that I've been using for 20 years, and I'm very used to working from there. A little bit something as an intro, where Alex is using VS Code. There is obviously the GitHub CLI to use as well. There are different product teams that are integrating GitHub into these IDEs, and somehow Visual Studio is still a little bit behind. It's like usually when there are some cool new features that are already available at CLI level or at VS Code, and it takes 3 to 6 months for them to be put back into or also integrated into Visual Studio. It's getting better now. And I have been talking with Microsoft, and the answer was, well, it's different product teams, so you just have to wait, basically. But my talk is going to be about GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio. And I'm briefly going about through today's agenda. So first of all, I want to go back a little bit and motivate why you should use AI-driven development, and also how my last 20 years of learning new stuff or development actually went, or how it went from I need help for a specific problem, and how it went down from a couple of days or to not getting an answer to sometimes getting an answer within 5 or 10 minutes. Then I'm going to talk about how or what GitHub Copilot can actually do, how it is integrated in Visual Studio. Then depending on how much time we have, I've prepared a small Visual Studio project or a C# project that is a backend project for a shop that has a shop controller, and it's by choice I made some. I have bad code, and I want to show you how you can use GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio to actually analyze the code, find some code smells, and come up with better implementation, all by just using prompts, basically. And then I will summarize with some pitfalls, what's still the responsibility of the developer, and some best practices. And I will end with a conclusion. And just to give you a small heads up with the best practices, they are changing so fast. Things that were best practices for me, like in October, are now built into these tools, and I have to, and now I have new best practices. And I think I will talk about how to find best practices as well. So a little bit about me. I've been developing in C# for 20 years now. I think it was Visual Studio 2003, and now we have 2026. Yeah, it's 26. Called 26 now. I have a background in computer science and mathematics, and I'm working as a full stack developer or as a senior solution architect, mainly on web projects that are either ASP.NET Core MVC or Web APIs with a SQL Server or in Azure. And I like Azure that much that I have this user group in Düsseldorf, the Azure Düsseldorf meetup, where we meet like once a month. And I like to talk about a couple of topics that I'm very fond of right now, like GitHub Copilot, like today, MCP or Azure OpenAI. I do have a GitHub Copilot newsletter on LinkedIn, where I try to push like everything every 2 or 4 weeks. There are either like news flashes to see what's happened in the last 4 weeks, or some episodes where I share what I coded. And I like to learn and like to collect certificates. But now let's head into AI-driven development and what my motivation is. And I start by a little journey that started 20 years ago and how my perspective on programming was. I will divide it into 4 different phases, and the phases can be a little bit on how I was able to get help. And when I started programming, I mean, the internet was already there, but the resources were not as they are today. And I actually bought print media, magazines, books, or I had some offline helps just to figure out a problem if I was stuck somewhere. So for instance, I'm not sure who of you still remembers that there was this F1 shortcut for a help dialog. I haven't used it in years, but it actually was there. Then I think around 2006 or 7 or something like that, I switched to online communities to get some additional help. In Germany, we had mycsharp.de. It's a very great platform. I've been there for years. I've learned a lot about programming there. I ask questions, I answer questions. Then I had this phase for, I think, 2, 3, 4 years. Every blog post from Scott Hanselman or Scott Guthrie, I even wrote a small program that like every hour checked their blogs and sent me an email if there was like a new blog post so that I could just learn some new stuff. In 2009, I had Stack Overflow, which drastically changed how I was able to get help because I could just ask questions or just learn by reading other people's questions. If I had like a compile downtime for 5 or 10 minutes, I would just see what the new C# questions, and I just was able to get some help there. Then one of the biggest leaps or the biggest improvement was because there was one downside with Stack Overflow. I mean, I could ask questions, but sometimes they were so obscure or there was a niche problem that no one else had. And when I asked the questions, sometimes it took like 5 days to have someone to give me an answer, or there was no answer at all. That like this bounty system where you get points when you answer questions and somebody upvotes your answer, and you can like take a part of these points and put it up as a bounty for someone else to answer a question. So this is something that I did for questions where I was stuck for like over a week. And I just wanted to get this done because the problem didn't solve itself. And the thing that helped me the most was switching to ChatGPT, where I was actually able to have someone in like real time that is able to give me answers, but there are still some drawbacks. For instance, whenever I had a problem, ChatGPT was in the browser and my code that's in the IDE and in my file system, they're not connected. And it's a good thing that they're not connected. But always when I wanted to find a solution for a problem, or I wanted to have some ideas generated, or whatever of kind of help I wanted to have with ChatGPT, I still had to copy and paste my code into the browser. And every single time I had to explain what the project is about, what the context is, what are the relevant methods. For instance, if one method references another one, which also references another one, I had to copy all these 3 methods in there. And I had to explain all this context. And it was very tedious because a lot of context that is in the code was lost by copying it to Stack Overflow, to ChatGPT. And it was always a mental interruption for me because I was like, okay, now I need to, for the next 15 minutes, I need to explain everything. And I was not in the code anymore, not the piece of software that I was actually working on. And even if I got a good answer, I still had to copy paste back everything that I had in ChatGPT, I mean, it was a good thing if I had the answer, but I still had to copy it back into my code, make sure everything compiles. If the generated answer produced code that was not compilable, it was a back and forth of, oh, this code is not compiling. Let me copy back what I edited from my original code and your snippet and so on. It was better than Stack Overflow in terms of how fast I was getting help, but it was still tedious. And last year, when GitHub Copilot became available in, or the agent mode, I will explain later what the agent mode and the different modes are in Visual Studio. When this came on, I think in June, this was a very big game changer for me because context is something that is now can easily be transferred into an LLM instead of just copy and pasting everything. So what is context? So that's my current code, my project structure, naming conventions, maybe some files that explain that a naming convention are inside the source control in some markdown file, dependencies that I have on third-party dependencies, which version they're using. Sometimes ChatGPT produced solutions for different versions of my dependencies. Sometimes I cannot upgrade them due to some constraints and so on. So this is something that definitely helped. And this was a very big productivity boost for me because GitHub Copilot in the IDE knows the structure, or like all these coding agents. I will later on tell you why Visual Studio inside IDE has, I think, at least 2 big points that the other CLI integrations, etc., don't have. Well, GitHub Copilot knows the structure. It can see my code, the conventions, and I don't need to like switch somewhere. I just need to have like, I have this sidebar on with a prompt window where I can ask questions, and it feels more integrated actually. So with all this more context that is easily available without me spending time to explain the context, I save time by less explaining, and I can even get better suggestions. So okay, now we have GitHub Copilot, but what can we actually use it for in terms of code? I mean, we can analyze existing code. We can go on and let me put all these things here and then talk. We can analyze existing code. We can check existing code and extend it and say, hey, I want to have a new feature. Please analyze the code base. I want to have a new button, a new checkbox at this and this menu. I can go on and say, please, I want to have a new project. Please generate it from scratch. It should be a small console application that transforms X to Y and so on. I can have it look at existing code and I say, there's some code that I don't like. This is actually something that I'm going to show you in the live demo later on. I can do debug exceptions. That is something that is one of the 2 things that I just mentioned. That's very good if you're using Visual Studio to debug your source code, because when you have an exception, your execution is halted and you're basically in sort of a breakpoint where you have access to your stack trace, and you can put this information back into the LLM or back through GitHub Copilot into the LLM of your choice, and can go on from there. You can like upgrade your NuGet packages, .NET versions. This is something that I've tried for the release of .NET 10, and I've tried it for older versions. I think I've tried it 2 or 3 times. Right now, it's still not at a state where it's worth to do it with the integrated upgrade engine, because I think I've always tried it, reverted it back, and did it manually. So this is something where it needs improvement. Create tests. I definitely told you earlier that I'm in this one specific project. I'm at 100 tests, and I didn't write any of them. And compiler warnings is something that I usually got ignored by developers. And for most of my projects, I'm down to 0 compiler warnings, just to have like a cleaner build when I'm taking a look at the CI/CD approach and see all the compile logs. I don't want to see the same warnings that I've been keeping there for the last 5 years. But if I make an upgrade somewhere and I see there's a deprecation warning or something, I can immediately spot it. Okay, a little bit deeper into GitHub Copilot. How would I define what GitHub Copilot is? I would say it's an AI-powered assistant that that supports developers directly in the IDE. Well, can also be from a CLI, but the idea is that you're more efficient at understanding, writing, and reviewing code while reducing the manual effort. And Copilot uses the current project context to make situation-specific suggestions and speed up repetitive tasks. I think this is something Alex might be talking about with skills later on. So to summarize, or to give some other small words to what GitHub Copilot is and what it is not, I would say GitHub Copilot is a context-aware assistant. It's a pair programmer and an idea generator. For a couple of my hobby projects, I implemented new features, and GitHub Copilot suggested some additional things. For instance, I said I want to have this one feature, and I think it comprises 6 sub features that I want to have. And the implementation, I got 8 features because GitHub Copilot decided, hey, there are 2 things. I think you will like them. Let me just implement them, and you can review them. You review them later and remove them if you don't like it. So it's definitely also an idea generator. But what is GitHub Copilot not? It's not an autopilot. It's not a replacement for developers or for code reviews. And it's definitely no guarantee of correct code, unfortunately. Even though your code might compile, it can still not do what it is supposed to do. How does it look like if you're working with GitHub Copilot inside Visual Studio? This is like the main interaction that you see. You have this chat window that is changing a little bit over time. For instance, you can have your prompt down here. You can reference specific files, lines of code. You can tell you can tell GitHub Copilot in what mode or what agent mode you're using. You can tell which LLM you're using with GitHub Copilot. I'm going to talk about the selection on the next slide. You can have some settings, which sort of MCP servers you can use to extend your capabilities. You can create different threads. You can remove them, or you can switch between different threads and see and work on things that you, or in sessions that you had like a week ago. You can go back there and the context is still preserved from the session. What do you need for GitHub Copilot? You need a GitHub account. You need a GitHub Copilot subscription. There are a couple of ways to get it. Most of them are paid. They are divided between business subscriptions and non-business subscriptions. And basically the idea is, and I'm going to talk about how consumption is being built on, I think, the next slide. You have premium requests, and this is basically how the consumption is measured. And depending on which level you're on, you have access to different models. There is a student plan that gives you the, I think the Pro or Pro Plus plan, but 3 or 4 days ago, GitHub decided to, unfortunately, decided to remove some of the more complex models and not give them students for free anymore. So if you're enrolled in some university with a student email address, you can get like a student pack and have the Pro subscription, but unfortunately that got gutted a couple of days ago, and upgrading from that to a paid version still has some kinks out, unfortunately. GitHub Copilot is integrated into a couple of IDEs. I'm talking about Visual Studio. Alex is talking about Visual Studio Code. You obviously have the CLI, something that I was afraid of using for a long time, but I think it's almost the same, but it's just like less graphics and less graphical interface, but more like using your keyboard and stuff. Then obviously you have the web browser if you're on github.com, or you have other IDEs like JetBrains, Eclipse, or Xcode, where you can use GitHub Copilot. So one of the strengths that I see in GitHub Copilot is that GitHub Copilot is not specific on one model or one model from a specific vendor. For instance, if you're using Cloud Code, you have access to the cloud models, but not to the models of the other vendors. GitHub Copilot is evolving at a very high speed, so new models are basically added every month. And I think up until December, there was a preview phase where you had there was a new model, and it took a couple of weeks to become general available. And I think in January or December, they changed this. They said the rollout is going so well, we're just going to roll out every new model as general availability. And usually you have to enable new models on github.com in the repository. So if you see a changelog somewhere or read my LinkedIn newsletter and see that there is a new model available, you have to turn it on either in your individual settings or if you're using GitHub as an organization in the organizational settings. How does billing work? Billing works on premium requests and not on tokens. So the idea is if you have one very big task that you can define in a single prompt, and this prompt may run for 2 hours, that's just one request. You see on the right side, you see different numbers. These are a multiplicator of how many premium or how much of a request is going to cost you with this specific model. You see some models that have the value of 1, so 1 prompt there. Even if it's a hello or something like this, it's going to take 1 premium request. There are cheaper models that are only at the third, but there are also some models that are for free. So this is something that is actually good, because if you compare GitHub Copilot with Claude or the Claude models, if you were to use Claude Code directly, you don't have a session limit or a weekly limit. That is something that annoys me in Claude, that if you start on a task, you sometimes have to wait a couple of hours to continue, or you put additional money into it and pay for premium requests. In Visual Studio, or sorry, in GitHub Copilot, you have a monthly limit that resets, I think, on the 1st. And also, one thing that is that you should make use of is that there are free models. There are some models that have the multiplicator of 0. So if you have a big task, you can use a complex model to come up with a plan. For instance, like Claude Opus model or something not shown here on the right. But you can have like an expensive model come up with an implementation plan, but the actual implementation of all these programming tasks, they can be done by all these standard models that basically cost nothing. And apart from some people that I've seen on Reddit that got blocked for like abusing the system, like there's this Ralph Wiggum approach where you have like a self-improving loop, and if you have this running for a long time, and sometimes it's a little bit wonky on how GitHub determines if you are trying to use it in a normal way or not. But basically, these free models help out a lot, and I only managed to only hit the limit once. How am I doing on time? 20 minutes. I think that's going great. So first of all, prompting is a skill. It's not something that magically works. Earlier, we talked about requirements and in terms of what do I want to develop. But if you want to implement these requirements, you also need to transfer this knowledge into the LLM or into GitHub Copilot. So if you're just like writing one sentence and say, please implement the project, you might get some questions back in terms of what project you want to have implemented, or you get some sort of project, but not the one you wanted to. So this is actually something that we could have talked about in the roundtable, if I think about it now. Prompting is a skill because you need to be specific in what you want, and you need to actually have it written down, or you need to give like a general idea and discuss with the with GitHub Copilot on how you want to have everything implemented. And if your prompts are poor, for instance, when I'm prompting, it is sometimes 5 to 10 minutes, 50 minutes to come up with a very long prompt, and I'm very specific about what I want, what I not want, and I'm going to specify all of this. One good practice, I'm not sure if I have this on the slide, is that I'm using a voice-to-text approach, where I'm like 3 times faster when I just hold down the keyboard and activate like I just speak into the microphone, and afterwards all my thoughts are written down into the prompt window of GitHub Copilot or the CLI. This works very good. I saw this online. This is also one of the reasons why I'm talking today and like to consume on knowledge on how others are programming, because if you see how others are using agentic AI, you can think about what types of what you can actually apply to your usage of agentic AI. Okay, back to the slide. Poor prompts produce obviously bad results and not the desired code. So if you complain that GitHub Copilot is not doing what you wanted to do, I would say 80% of the time it's your fault because you didn't specify actually what you want. And GitHub Copilot has to make assumptions if you leave something out of the prompt, or if there are multiple ways to do something. GitHub Copilot might just take one of these assumptions, and one of them, the assumption that GitHub Copilot then takes might not be the one that you want, and then you have like this really big QA loop where you say, no, why did you implement it this way? I usually want it the other way, but you didn't specify it earlier. So keep in mind, poor prompts reduce bad code, and obviously good prompts, it's the other way around. You have code that better fits the way you want it to be, and you have to rework it less. How does it work in Visual Studio with the GitHub Copilot? There are a couple of features, and I'm going to briefly talk about 3 different modes and inline suggestions. So if you're new to your project or new to GitHub Copilot, the ask mode is your way to go, like for instance, for the first day or something, because if you're using the ask mode, GitHub Copilot only gets read-only access to your project. You can ask things like, how does method XX work? Is XX used anywhere in the code? How can I improve XX? Or you can like mark a couple of lines of code. You have a right click, and in the context menu you say explain or add to chat. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Copilot can use the project context in real time. So for instance, if GitHub Copilot is reading a specific method and that one uses another one, it can automatically like follow the definition of the other method in another class and reloads the project into the context if it's needed. And yeah, obviously you don't need to copy and paste code anymore because the GitHub Copilot chat window has access to your code. And it's very nice to ask clarifying questions. But the thing that was the most aha moment for me basically was when agent mode was released, because agent mode can implement multiple changes in multiple files autonomously and generate new codes. And this is actually like the core feature of GitHub Copilot for me. If you're using the agent mode, it works with prompts, instruction files, internal rules. Maybe we will talk about this later, or Alex will. And basically, you can do all the things that I listed earlier. You can implement new features. You can fix bugs. You can generate documentation, test cases. You can make a cleanup if you say, there's this variable that is used 3 times at different places. Please refactor this into a central static class and reference all the code things there. Amazing, amazing what you can actually do there. Then there is this debug mode. This is the second thing that I like about the IDE integration, because if you're hitting a breakpoint, either by manually setting the breakpoint or if you're in an exception, GitHub Copilot can access the value of the variables and the call stack during a debug session. So if you have an exception, you can put the exception, but also the input of the variables into GitHub Copilot. Fortunately, there is a prompt that asks, are you sure that you want to inject the information that you have into GitHub Copilot? Because depending on how good or badly your development setup is, you need to make sure that there is no personal information from like customers or something that you want to, or that you would inject into GitHub Copilot. Although there are some sort of filtering methods to put these out, you should not be working in your local development environment with real customer data anyway. So this is something where you can usually press yes if you know what you're doing. And you can, for instance, use it to analyze logic errors. Here's an example of what I found online on LinkedIn, I think 3 months ago. This was an example of a method that has a temperature sensor. And the idea is to have a method that tells you when it's getting too hot or too cold. So you have a baseline temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. And currently there is 22 degrees. And the idea is, please give me an alert or say that is an anomaly if it's 5 degrees above or below the baseline. So either if it's above 25 or below 15 degrees Celsius. And I can basically put a breakpoint here. And this is something that I think they should have advertised more in the change logs. When you're hitting a breakpoint, you have this small Copilot icon here, and you can just click on Analyze with Copilot. And what happens is the method is being analyzed, and GitHub Copilot tells me, I think you have a logic error there because just 2 degrees Celsius next to the baseline level, that's not an anomaly. That is like actually what you defined as normal. So GitHub Copilot then suggests to me that we could just fix it from a lesser operator to a greater equal operator. And this is actually very nice. Or if I'm if I have an exception that is being caught by the IDE, I can just click on this Analyze with Copilot, and in this case, I've put a null reference here. Input is null, and I want to access the length property of something that is null. So obviously, I get null reference exception, and also says here text was null. But I can also click on Analyze with Copilot here. This works very nice. Unfortunately, it's still not at a state that can combine different threads. So if I'm developing a new feature and I'm running it and I have this exception and I click on Analyze with Copilot, I'm being forced into another conversation thread, which has access to the code and the variables, but actually not to the prompt of what the features that we're currently developing right now. I just hope that this will be something that they can put into the context where the feature is actually being developed. Okay, let's talk about the fourth integration that's inline suggestions. That's something where GitHub Copilot can suggest small chunks of codes when we don't explicitly write prompts in the chat window. For instance, we could write something like // so that's for a comment, write a method that reverses a string, and then we see this suggestion that we can press tab to accept it or escape to dismiss the suggestion. This is something that I'm personally not really using, apart from like mapping different DTOs and stuff. Then I'm using it, but my personal experience is I must always review these suggestions. Sometimes they're very spot on, that do exactly what I want to do, but like 70, 80, 90% of the times they're just way off and do something else, because just this context is not enough to fill out 20 lines of code, especially when I'm implementing a new feature that is not there in the code base. So GitHub Copilot won't know what is in my head because I haven't written it down. So always think that Copilot can make wrong assumptions here. Previously, I talked about context, and context is very important in terms of how these LLMs can get access to your code or have like the relevant pieces of information. The models that evolve, they get bigger, they have access to larger context windows. I think right now we are almost at 1 million, but I think at the start of the year we were at like 50,000, 100,000 tokens, and you couldn't just load the entire project into the LLM. And so the idea, or what the GitHub Copilot team came up with last year and how they explain it in all their slides, is that GitHub Copilot uses context from various sources. For instance, if I'm Visual Studio and I have like 10 open tabs that are related or hopefully related to the feature that I'm working on, all this information can be passed, or the code in there can be passed into the LLM to help with giving context. I think this is something that is becoming more relevant because the models grow in size and you can basically put in more code in, and it doesn't really matter which tabs you have open, but just what other code is referenced in other files. Just load all of this code anyway. And yeah, basically you can, in the chat window, you can write class names or method names, or not even like the correct spelling of it, but some variation, and through some string distance and lookup features, GitHub Copilot will find the class name inside your folder structure and go on from there. You can actually go and reference a specific piece of code or a class with the hashtag key, but I find to do this less frequently because the lookup just gets way better. Yeah, and this is what I was telling you about. You can just select a piece of code, right-click on the context window, Copilot Actions, and add to chat. And then you have this here in the top pane. And if you put like the hashtag here, you can select code from everywhere, or the selections that you already made there. So for instance, if you have like this big class with methods that do something similar, and you only want to reference line 70 through 90, then this might be one way to give some context. Okay, this was the first part. Let's switch over to Visual Studio. I hope you can read everything. So this is my Visual Studio in dark mode. I'm in GitHub Copilot, and let's just say I just start this project. I have no idea what is actually going on here, and I told you earlier that it's a backend method where we have some order controller for some orders, and we have an in-memory database or database in-memory store that has 2 orders generated as seed data, but we can have endpoints to add orders there and like get endpoints to get all orders and stuff like this. And let's start by saying, or I hope you can read everything here. If not, please tell me, and I will look at my other monitor. Could you share your slides here and with the link now? Thanks. No, I can provide the slides later, but I don't have a link right now. I need to upload this, but we can manage that. So the idea is that I'm new in this code and I don't want to change anything, and I click on ask mode and I just say, please summarize what the orders controller does, and please list the endpoints. Let me see where the zoom. Where's the zoom setting? Yeah, perfect. So I think this one's better for you for the screen sharing. But I do have this one on GitHub, I think. Let me see. While GitHub Copilot is working, I can give you the code so you can check it out yourselves. Just 1 second. You can even like go along and use my exact prompts. No, this was the wrong window. Just 1 second. Maybe Alex, one of you can forward this into the chat because I'm not joined in the chat and I want to continue with this one here. So we got a summary of what the order controller actually does. It's we have a couple of endpoints to retrieve orders, to create a new order, and there was also analysis already. There are a couple of code smells, and this is something that we want to improve actually. And the idea is that we're going to ask next, what are the top 5 risks or bugs in create and update status, focus on validation, inconsistent behavior, and API contract issues? And while GitHub Copilot is working here, we can extend this and see what files are actually being read. For instance, now GitHub Copilot is working or is reading the fake order store, and I have some GitHub Copilot instruction here. And oh, this is new. I can actually like, hit the retry button. I haven't seen this one before, but now we have like the top 5 risks and bugs that are there. And one of the problem is that the price of the order is calculated by multiplying the individual item price with the quantity, but I can actually go there and put in a price of 0 or a negative price. So if I order something, I actually get money to my bank account. If I were to find such a shop in real life, I would definitely give it a try to see if this works. And there are some weird string comparisons here, like what is the paid status, uppercase, lowercase, and stuff. And this looks very ugly, but we're going to change this. And how are we going to do this? First of all, I still want to be in the ask mode, but I want to give Copilot a new task, and I say propose an incremental refactoring plan, a maximum of five steps that keeps the existing routes and response JSON stable. So, I mean, I could obviously say, please rewrite everything, but I want to have a little bit of consistency of how it was before. So I may have an existing front end or a couple of front ends or API users that use my API, and I don't want all of the applications to be broken just because GitHub Copilot changed some routes. So I said, please keep the routes and just have a look of what we can change internally. So for instance, there is one thing that I have a couple of methods that the data that is returned, there are different classes. Sometimes it's the database model, the in-memory model that is returned. Sometimes it's the data transfer object. We have this, I told you about this different spellings of paid, cancel, and so on. And the validation is a little bit weird. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chains off or the gloves off, and I say, now I want to use the agent mode. So the write access is now gone. And I'm going to put this query in here. I say, refactor the API to move business logic out of the orders controller into new order service. And I gave it the following constraints: keep the existing routes and query parameters, do not add third-party packages, do not change the seeded data behavior, because in this fake data store, I had 2 orders already in there. The controllers should return the DTO consistently, and a couple of things that I want to have here. Now I click on basically just enter and wait it out. And this could actually be a good way to show you how I'm working with GitHub Copilot or these things in general while I'm waiting for code changes. How do I review code? This is something that is also coming up in the best practice part. Let me see if I'm prompted. No, GitHub Copilot creates the plan. This plan mode is something that is available in Visual Studio Code and the CLI, but the plan mode is something that is not available just yet in the full Visual Studio IDE. Plan mode actually means come up with the plan, and the user has to accept the plan before any change has been implemented. So my go-to was that I explicitly told at the end of the prompt, please don't do any changes. I need to confirm this. So this is something that I, no, that's the wrong directory. 1 second. I was still at reading. So the idea is that I have my Git IDE of my choice, that is this fork. I have this one up and running, and while the agentic AI is generating code, I can already review some changes here. For instance, I can say, I like this interface. These methods look great. I'm putting this into the staging area, and now I see that the order service for the iOrder service interface was being created. I can see here that we're still just in this phase of moving the code from the controller into a service because I still have this code here. Maybe I actually have 3 prompts for this. What is my time doing? Where's the time? 40 minutes, so I have another 20 minutes left. So I would say we can be here for another 5 minutes. Always right, makes no mistakes if you use Copilot. Yeah. So definitely use source control when using GitHub Copilot, because sometimes you have a solution that is going great and later iterations change it. Or, I mean, like programming in general, if you don't use source control, you can basically lose good code that you had earlier. So it's a little bit slow today. Maybe it depends on the model that I chose. I'm usually rotating between the models just to see how good they are. But most of the time, I'm using cloud models anyway. Okay, while this one is working, I'm giving it a second prompt, and we read what GitHub Copilot already did. It's moved the code into the iOrder service and order service, and refactored the orders controller, and it kept my existing routes. The next thing that I told was please improve the status handling. Create a single place to parse and validate status and new status values, accept common variants. So we will hopefully not have this paid and cancelled in uppercase and lowercase variants, and remove duplicate codes, and please don't change these routes. Before I just stage all these changes so that we can see what the refactoring now is going to look like. This is something that I do when I know I'm going to have multiple prompts, because I start to work on something that I find there are new ideas that I want to incorporate, or I know that the first implementation is probably not going to be the last. I did it already. Build succeeded. Maybe I already, oh, now it's refreshed. So now we have this refactoring here that I asked for, and all these string things, they were put into this order status parse order status method. Let us do a final cleanup. This is the second to last prompt that I'm going to show you. Basically, we're going to have some validation, and we want to avoid duplicate computation methods. In the essence of time, I'm going to prepare the second prompt here. This is something that annoys me in Visual Studio. This is something that Visual Studio Code already has, that is message queuing. So basically, GitHub Copilot is still working on this prompt, and I see it's working here, but I can only stop it. I just can't. If I press enter, I'm not sure if you're hearing it. I just pressed it like 10 times. This message is still being here, and if I want to go get a coffee right now, but I want to have this one executed, I basically have to wait until I can get the coffee just to send this one to the LLM. So the CLI has it, Visual Studio Code already has it, but the full Visual Studio, it's not having it just yet. And I can always recommend to use the insiders version of Visual Studio, which is basically like the preview channel. It gets the updates like 2, 3, or 4 weeks in advance of the major version, and that's like usually a very long time just to wait for new features, and it's very stable. Like this is the first time that on release day, I installed Visual Studio 2026, and I think on the second day I just updated the insiders version. I do have the full version still running, but I'm just using the insiders version just because it's so stable. This is something that didn't work the last couple of years, but it's working with 2026 very well. So the last thing that I want to show you is that we have some tests here, or actually we have one test here, just a smoke test to see if the API is actually starting. I think I find it a little bit different to have this project being generated. Like if there are no tests and I say, please add a test project, this is like a limitation of Visual Studio where it gets stuck in terms of which NuGet package do I need, and it was easier for me to add this by manually and then just say, please have a look at these tests and generate one more. And the idea is that I said, please extend the integration tests, add a test that posts an API order to create an order, and we get the HTTP 201 accepted response code. And then afterwards get this order by ID and assert that the email address that I put in there and the currency are matching to the response that I'm giving. So I'm staging this here. Usually I would review this, but I basically know what is what the changes are supposed to be. And since this is not production code, this is fine for just having a look at it. Okay, so I guess GitHub Copilot was very fast here because now there are two tests ran, and previously we just had one test. So now you see here, oh, it already ran. So now it generated this new code. And if you see a highlighted block of code, you can actually click on keep here and to say, like, sorry, this keep, like this is the, that you want to keep this change. This is a little bit different on how keeping changes with Git works. You should have this in sync. So if there is something that you don't like and you click on discard here and you revert it, you haven't reverted it here, and after GitHub Copilot does the next change, it will assume that you deleted the code by accident and put it back here. So you should decline some changes here. But having a look at all this code, now we could see here that integration at xml.com at example.com should be the request, and I mean we can give it another run and see that it passes. As I was saying before, this is an automatically generated test. So obviously this is something that I need to review manually and see, does it use the correct endpoint? Are the asserts correct, and so on? But in this case, it worked great, and we were able to just add an integration test by basically just writing add a test that does a post and use a get to assert that it works. And this is something that I really like in terms of test integration. But these are very easy tests because they this is like an in-memory test. I can repeat it a couple of times and so on. And automated testing can get very complicated, but this is a very easy scenario. So this was the live demo. Let me switch back to my PowerPoint presentation. And it looks like I still have 50 minutes left. That is excellent. So what did we just see? We saw that GitHub Copilot understood the existing code and the project structure. Okay, the project was obviously like a small example project, but this code got understood. And we were able to perform refactoring and multiple files, and we had explicit instructions and constraints like, please don't change the route. And this is exactly what was kept in. The code was better, but it wasn't perfect code. I mean, perfect code for this example is arguably something that is very difficult, but if I were to generalize it, you can have working code, but it's not always the perfect code. So, oh, it's the wrong, no, this next slide. We saw the speed. For instance, let's say I want to write, or I would want to write the test myself. And maybe I haven't written the test in like 3 months, or I don't know if this project is using XUnit, NUnit, or I forgot what the third one is called like. And maybe I need to look this up and like debug the test and the test generation. It might take me like 20 minutes to get back into the syntax. And what GitHub Copilot did here was that it massively accelerated my development. It may have not understood what my business intent was because it was just like the small order store, and there wasn't much of an explanation of what the project is actually for. There may be some new or there might be a code smell or something that doesn't work right away. And GitHub Copilot then bears no responsibility, because that is something that I need to do. I am responsible for code reviews, for tests, and the architecture. And GitHub Copilot is something that can help you very well, but in the end, the responsibility always stays with the developer. Why does GitHub Copilot work so well in the IDE? So basically, that is a recap of what we had earlier, what the transition from I have to copy and paste something to ChatGPT, write a prompt there, and put it back here is done. So we have GitHub Copilot has access to the full project and the solution. We have naming conventions and patterns, and we have no loss of productivity developer, because developer productivity, because I didn't need to switch to some browser and paste something. Well, arguably I pasted the instruction, but this was because it's a workshop and I have this one prepared. But otherwise, I would have written the prompt myself. Let's talk about pitfalls and responsibility. So, well, basically, I feel like I'm repeating myself. So I have a speed up. It can make GitHub Copilot can make mistakes, and it usually doesn't understand the context beyond the code that was given. Arguably, this is something that has improved a lot over the last couple of months. Sometimes I'm really amazed on what GitHub Copilot actually understands of my business logic, and sometimes it can find stuff that I would have forgotten if I were to manually implement a change somewhere. For instance, I have a couple of a very big project, and I wanted to do changes at 3 different places in the code, and I forgot that there was a fourth. And GitHub Copilot said, there is a fourth one that looks familiar. Are you sure that this is not something that we also need to use there? But the responsibility still stays with me. But what has gotten very good is the code reviewing part. For instance, this is like a workflow that we're doing at our company, that we're using GitHub Copilot to check the work of colleagues. For instance, if they introduce new code, we can, as a first step, analyze the Git commit with GitHub Copilot and see, is there something wrong with it? Do you think there are like possible exceptions? What kind of corner cases did the developer forget or something? This works really, really well. But unfortunately, Copilot still makes a lot of mistakes and can make wrong assumptions. Well, these can be sort of fixed if the prompt is good enough, but sometimes you still have hallucinations or overly optimistic statements. I think it was like 4 months back. It took me 2 days to work on something regarding to certificates and how I'm using C# backend to communicate to Apple Wallet entries that there is an update. There's a specific workflow of 3 or 4 steps. This was something that I wanted to have, or that I tried to have implemented with GitHub Copilot, and it always said, no, it should work and so on. But it took me a couple of hours to find out that there was one step in this 5-step process missing from my code. And only when I told GitHub Copilot, there are 5 steps, you only have implemented 4, it said, okay, yeah, now you're obviously right. Sorry, I forgot this. I will add the last step. Or I had another certificate problem. I migrated some web app in Azure to a new app service plan that ran on a new hardware, on a new virtual machine, and there were some restrictions regarding certificates that weren't on the old machine. And I think it took me 7 hours to find the correct Azure setting, but it was always GitHub Copilot that told me, yeah, I know the error. I just need to make one small change and then you can deploy it. We are almost done. I can guarantee it to you 100%. And this went on for hours, and I always had my fist through the monitor, and I was like, this was pure garbage in terms of GitHub Copilot. So one of the best practices that I can give you, anything that has to do with certificates, do it by hand. Don't use GitHub Copilot. It will just cost you more time. And sometimes this, I'm almost there, or I'm certain that it will work. If you read this, it's usually a hint of it's not going to work. So what are everyday dangers? Obviously, if you don't do code reviews and you don't have tests and you blindly trust all the changes, that is something that is a danger, and it can give you a false sense of responsibility. So that is basically familiar to when you're getting pull requests from your colleagues on parts of codes that you're maybe not that familiar with. And there is a solution. If you have test coverage, you actually know if your code base is still working or if it's broken. But having a brownfield project and adding thousands of tests later on, that is obviously something that is, for most of the projects, not going to happen. But if you have a good test coverage, the trust that you can put into GitHub Copilot or into any agentic AI is much higher. So if you don't have this, you still have the responsibility for architectural decisions, error analysis, maintainability. So the code may look great and fancy, but if you don't understand the code, and if you were to look at it 2 weeks later, then it's obviously not maintainable. Let us briefly go to best practices. I think I have another 5 minutes, so that should line up perfectly fine. So yeah, I already said use the insiders version instead of the normal release channel. Then you have this GitHub instructions markdown file where you can put in some information in terms of what the agentic AI, how it should behave, for instance, what are the coding guidelines and so on. This is a file that is, I'm going to show you the whole slide and then I'm going to continue talking. This is actually something that is being injected into every session or even after every prompt, because if you have long-running sessions, a couple of instructions that you gave a couple of hours ago or 10,000 of tokens ago, they might not be relevant anymore, or if the context is compacting, this might be gone. So with this Copilot instructions MD, that is something that is being injected very frequently. And let me combine this with task 4. If you're too lazy to write it, to write this instruction file by yourself, you can prompt GitHub Copilot to write this instruction file for you. So you can basically just review it and remove some stuff that is wrong, etc. But then you also have like a feeling of how good does GitHub Copilot understand your code. However, there's a recent study by Gluaguen, maybe it's called AI. They analyzed these instruction files, and their conclusion was that it is better to have them handwritten and not have them auto-generated, because the outcome or the performance is better. And the third one is, as I said, the best practices are changing every month or every couple of months, because the development of GitHub Copilot is just so fast. This is something that I had to write earlier. If you have any questions, ask them before implementing. So as I said, if GitHub Copilot makes assumptions on what you want, you can make a wrong assumption. So this is something, this was my workaround for having plan mode in Visual Studio, but in VS Code and CLI, you basically have the plan mode and have to accept the plan before any implementation is then done. Then obviously, if you want to have a very big piece of software or a very big feature, it is a good idea to break this big task down into smaller steps and outline like what is the general idea of the feature, and say, we're going with an approach of 3 parts. This is part 1, part 2, and part 3. Please focus on part 1 at the beginning of your implementation, but keep in mind what part 2 and 3 are going to extend, or how the code is going to be extended by part 3 and 2. You can use let's move to best practice number 6. You can use the chat window for code reviews. So I had this fork window as my Git UI running, and if I see that GitHub Copilot makes some or produces some code or in some coding convention that I don't like, I can just write it down while reviewing it, either in a notepad or in the prompt window. And as soon as GitHub Copilot is done, I just hit enter, and the my QA is being processed. And this message queuing, as I said, it's already in VS Code. And I can encourage you to rotate between VS Code, and GitHub CLI, just to see how new features are feeling like. Or if, for instance, sometimes you want to have this specific feature that is not available in VS. So just use VS Code or CLI as prompting window. And if you still want to debug your code, just use the normal VS. Well, if you're not sure, that's best practice 8. If Copilot can handle your specific case, just give it a try, ask it, and discuss with GitHub Copilot what kind of feature you want to implement. Ideally, you come up with an implementation plan that looks great. And if the implementation by GitHub Copilot was way off and you want to do it by hand, you still have this huge implementation plan that you can basically do by hand. So it's not like you're wasting time if GitHub Copilot can't complete your work, because the first part is defining the requirements, and that you have to do anyway. Sometimes the agentic AI is stuck, so please write something like yes or please continue into the chat window to prompt it to continue working. And that is something that that I also like, is that if I implement a new feature, it's documented nowhere. So I ask GitHub Copilot, please write it, some documentation for the feature that you just implemented, so that I can look this up as a human, or if GitHub Copilot resumes this, like from another machine or another developer wants to continue on this feature, there is like a base reference that GitHub Copilot can use. And you can even put this into the Copilot instructions. MD is something that I did. After finishing an implementation, write a markdown file into the /docs directory. In that file, please describe important information, and so on. Let us think. I'm missing like a slide. Because of the time, I will try to go through here very quickly. So where does Copilot work especially well? If you're building or extending a CRUD application, so create, read, update, delete. If you have some web forms and so on, amazing. If you're using like standard patterns or repetitive tasks, for instance, you have like 3 different forms and you want to have another one, this is something where GitHub Copilot works very well, also for refactoring. And from my opinion, where GitHub Copilot currently hits its limits, it's complex business logic, or if you have some really large legacy code without structure that no human understands. This is also going to be difficult for GitHub Copilot. And of course, if you have implicit domain knowledge of something that is only in your head, but you haven't written it down somewhere, how should GitHub Copilot know what's in your head? And to connect back to this roundtable that we had earlier, what is my opinion on does AI replace developers? No, because we still have the responsibility of getting everything right. And usually software doesn't enter my local machine. I still have to deploy it somewhere, maintain it, be responsible for security things and so on. So AI can amplify good developers, but if I'm automating bad processes, they stay bad, and garbage in is the same as garbage out. My personal takeaway is that it is a very fascinating topic. Unfortunately, so many things are coming, like every new features, and it's very difficult to keep up with it. So it's very easy to fall behind in terms, or at least this is how I feel. But it reignited my motivation for evening hobby projects. So like after working a full day, and I can say, oh, okay, I have like 20 minutes just to implement a new feature or a small bug. That is very easy with GitHub Copilot now, and the decision to just work 20 minutes on something has become very easy. And obviously prompts matter a lot, and the responsibility, or to summarize it, the responsibility for the Copilot's work lies with the pilot, so the human that is actually driving it. One last slide and then I'm done. This is something that the GitHub Copilot has something that, or has a memory function since a couple of weeks. And the idea of how do we keep memory between different sessions, or how we can share it between different developers, and even have it like a source control track. This is something that there's going to be an event of the end of May where we are having 7 small lightning talks, and we try to get input from as much as perspectives as possible, well, 7. And we try to come up with best practices in terms of how we can improve the memory of agentic AI. We'll definitely paste this link somewhere afterwards, but yeah, this is, if you're interested in solving AI memory problems or seeing best practices, then come up there or have a look there. And sorry, I think I'm 2 minutes over my time. But if you're interested in the GitHub Copilot newsletter, or when I reach out to me or get the slides or something, you have 2 QR codes there. I think, Alex, I can give the word back to you.
To which, Alex?
Yeah, to which, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay, that's.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the great talk. It was a pleasure to have you here. You shared a lot of best practices somehow. What I was wondering, also best practice how to use Copilot. What is the biggest mistake you have seen that the users are going to hit GitHub Copilot and also on .NET?
The biggest mistake, I think this was about certificates, where I just blindly trusted everything, or I would say one best practice that I haven't written down is if I want to implement something that I can't do manually, AI might be the wrong tool if it's not just like create a web page. So if it's like connecting to a specific API and have like a workflow of specific things, and if I have not read the documentation or I don't know exactly how the implementation should be, I'm not able to do the quality assurance. And this is something where I don't know if the implementation is going to be correct or not. So I think this is the biggest thing, that I don't want to use GitHub Copilot for something that I can't do manually. A part of like using syntax, for instance, if I'm developing something in Angular, I'm not an Angular guy, but I can read the syntax and understand it. So this is different from like complex business logic that I don't know how the implementation should be.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. You get a lot of applause also in the comments, and we will share your links that you provided already. But now, Alex. Oh, Alex already shared the link in his. You see his link directly under the name, so you're ready to go somehow.
Yeah.
If you want to share your screen, we can start your talk. Thanks, Matthias. It was a pleasure. Really cool insights.
Need to give permission. 1 second.
Sure.
I need to reopen Chrome. Sorry, we'll be back.
Okay, Matthias, we are back. seven
back to
7 more minutes for you, perhaps.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I didn't share because of the time. Last year I did so many refactoring things on a project, hobby project of mine, where it took me like 2 years to come up with the motivation to refactor some Blazor thing that I put into an ASP.NET Core MVC application. I had it mixed, and this was like, okay, I need at least 40 hours to refactor this to be able to like work on the project how I want it to be. But I pushed it for like 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And then while I was on the train, I was like, okay, I'm watching Netflix anyway. Let's just give it a try. Just tell GitHub Copilot, please remove Blazor and refactor all these things. And I think the refactoring, it took 6 or 8 hours. That was so amazing. And I really like all the features that I implemented with it.
That's nice. Thank you very much. So Alex took only 1 minute. So we are somehow on time. Alex, if you're ready to go, the stage is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then yeah, let's go. Yeah, maybe as an introduction, I don't know if you saw the tweet from Andre Carpati last year in December, where he basically described that he is feeling a bit behind with everything that goes on with AI coding. And yeah, to be honest, I think most of us can relate to that problem, that every week, every month, there's a new release, new fancy things that are added, and it's a bit tricky to understand what is now really useful for your own job. But that's why we are here, because I believe there are not so many things you have to understand to get most out of the AI coding tools. And what we will do today is, first we will talk what is an agent. I think this is important, that people always talk what is an agent, but if you ask someone and they should give you a good answer, yeah, I don't know if you get a good answer back. Also context engineering, what is this? Then back pressure, sounds more complicated than it is in the end. And then we go more into the practical part. We talk what the agents MD is. We also talk about sub-agents. And the last part will be about skills that are really important. And there we also have some actual live coding part where we see how you can add skills. And we also look into different skills. And then we will have a live demo. So yeah, if you want, you can write in the chat, but I don't know if all of you have used VS Code Copilot. But yeah, would be interesting. But if not, then I will talk about that. A quick introduction for myself. My name is Alexander Opalic. I've been now more than 7 years developer. Most of the time it was always Vue on the front end, but I would call myself a full stack developer. I work at Otto Payments, company in Germany, in Hamburg. And I live in Gederzit, which is near south of Munich. And I also write blog posts. So you also see that this presentation that I gave is in the end also part of my blog post, where I added this fancy feature that you can press P and then you have a presentation. And I also like to speak and share my knowledge, also learn from the community. I think we really live in interesting times, and it's important that, yeah, on this whole AI thing going on, that we are not alone and can share our learnings, our concerns. So what is an agent? So if you remember, I don't know, it feels like forever, but at the beginning, yeah, ChatGPT, they released their UI and they only had a chat. And there you ask a question and then you get an answer. You could also use it for coding, which was still terrible because you have to copy paste the answer. But there was one huge problem, is if you wanted to know something like how did FC Bayern Munich played last week, the LLM gave you an answer, but it was wrong. And the reason why it was wrong is that the training data was not out to date. So it was just coming up with a lie in the end. But what ChatGPT did is they give their AI, the LLM, a tool where it can use the web and is doing fetch. And once you gave a LLM, which is your brain, a tool, then you have an agent, because then he is able to solve tasks for you. And I think this is everything. So an agent is the combination of tools and the LLM. And this is how an agent looks. So you see that we have something that thinks and have tools. And once it has the right tools, it can do many interesting things. This is also how, in the end, all the AI coding tools use. They're always a combination of the LLM, of the model, and of a tool. And it's also not so complicated to build your own coding agent. So for fun, I built with TypeScript my own coding agent. And here you see, I just told him to write some function, and then it was using some tools, and this was creating a new TypeScript file. And the way it works is that this is the main logic. You have a loop, and then you see it always calls itself until it's not making any tool calls anymore. So the agent needs to maybe read some files or write something, and once it needs to do anything, then it will stop, and then a user again can come up with the next prompt. So it's the core idea of also how VS Code Copilot works is like that in the end. So it's really simple. And the reason why this works is that the models get better. And also all modern models like Opus or Codex, they are trained that they should call tools. And if you want to build a coding agent, this is how we can give them more tools. It needs to read files, it needs to write files. And also Bash is probably the most powerful tool, because with Bash you can do everything else. And this is how a complete tool implementation could look, where we use TypeScript and we use also bun, and then we have the function and the LLM in a system prompt. There we describe that a read tool is available, and we tell the LLM which arguments it needs to give the tool. That is everything what we need to do. So for a coding tool, what do we need? We need read, we need write, we need edit, we need grep for search, and we need bash. Grep is also interesting because at the beginning, some AI coding tools were using vector embeddings and more complex things to read files. But Anthropic, with Cloud Code, they found out that if the LLM, if the model is really clever, you don't need to do any indexing. You can just use simple bash tools like grep. And if you look into VS Code, yeah, we can also do that. If you open a new chat in Copilot and you click on this here, you also see the tools that are available. So you see we have here a read tool, for example, and under read we have read file, we have view image. So VS Code Copilot has their own tool to read the image. And we can also give it more tools. So here are custom MCPs that are added. And yeah, this is how it works. So also web tool, of course. And with this idea, you can also create your own coding agent if you want and can customize things. Now let's talk about context engineering. What is context engineering? The biggest problem is that these LLMs are stateless. So you open a new chat. So if I open a new chat in a prompt, it has no idea how your project looks. So this is different to a human developer. If he was there for 2 or 3 years and he sees a ticket in his head, he already knows, okay, I need to touch this 5 files. But for the LLM, it has no idea. So it will always use tools. It will use the read tool, and there it tries to build up its context to know what it should do. But there are some things we can do to help the AI coding tool. So this is the main idea, that you start somewhere, you can think about the context as an array. And every time you do something, so I say, make the button blue, I add more and more things into the context, and it will grow and grow over time. And that's probably the most important thing to understand regarding context engineering, is that we don't have unlimited context window, and it also gets more stupid. Also, if now more and more models, they say they have 1 million tokens, there are many papers that describe that after 50 or 60% of context token use, the model will lose quality and gets more and more stupid. That's why I like this quote, that context engineering is the art and science of filling the context window with just the right information at each step of an agent's trajectory. So what does this mean? Is if you have a new chat, you need to try to only solve one task and don't ask it 2 or 3 different things. And this also applies if you use Gen AI for normal things besides of coding. You should not ask it how to go to place X in the same chat, and then you ask it for the perfect workout plan. So this is important. Always per task, use a new chat, give it a fresh context. And to visualize this better, that in the beginning, we start with, maybe not 0, because there's also other stuff going on, like there's a system prompt, but maybe we start at 3% of our context. And we have a ticket and we give it a LLM and then it increases, and then we try to use the same chat for a different task, and then it will get bigger. And then, yeah, after 80%, you see that the quality is now much worse than at the beginning. Also, to visualize that if you have a chat, you can think that this is happening. The AI coding tool is calling more tools, it does more things, the chat grows and grows. And then there will be a time where the chat is full, and then you also saw that what most of the tools are doing is that they automatically compact. So they do a summary of what has happened before. This can help that you can work longer on tasks, but this is still problematic because it's not really in your hand how they do the compaction. And yeah, sometimes in the end, the result could still be good, but also sometimes not. That's why I personally always try to not go into any state where I need to do compaction. And there's also a good blog post from Anthropic about that. You can read that later if you want, but the 3 main ideas how to improve it are: first, compaction. The other idea is that you could also have a longer chat, and then you say, okay, I know I need to do something else, but I need a new chat. You could just say, create a small note and save it somewhere else. And then you have a markdown file. And the advantage in comparison to compaction is that you see how the summary looks. So it's not some random things. And then if you create a new chat, you can just link the created markdown file. You can also just have a prompt or a skill and call it handoff, and that would do it automatically, that it will save the state, which the things you want to do next somewhere in the file system, and then you can continue. And also one way how to improve the whole context problem is to use sub-agents, but we will talk about it later more. So a bonus chapter, I would say, is what is back pressure. So also in our roundtable, we talked a bit how we can deal with quality. And I think with quality on code, we have the advantage that it's easier to test for quality. It's much harder to test something like how a good PowerPoint presentation should be. What is the idea? The idea is that we have a setup that the agent needs to call to verify his code. And if you have TypeScript projects, what is this? This can be the type check. It can also be ESLint, or it can also be tests. And once you have this set up, that after the agent is done with his task, it can run it, then you can guarantee some basic things like a function should not be too big. You could also have a quality check that you always need to have 80% of test coverage. So you enforce the agent to verify its own code, what it did. And this is also that we can do with coding. We can't do it with PowerPoint presentations. Or if you write a book, how can you verify that the book is good? Yeah, you could do a spell checker, but it's still tricky. That there are much more things related to books. I think for coding, it's easier to verify it. But yeah, this is the idea of back pressure. Now the first practical approach how we can improve coding, and this is also the first place that I would go to a new code base. I would look, do they have an agents AMD file or Copilot instructions file? It's in the end the same or not? And if so, how do they structure it? So agentsMD. AgentsMD is every time you create a new chat, there's no context there. And with the agentsMD, you give the agents some basic idea about your project. Is this a front-end project? Is this a back-end project? How can it run tests? How can it run linting? These things that you know that on every session it needs to know that. And this is also a standard. So this is an iframe. So this is an official website, AgentsMD. And there you can also see how this looks. I would not add the coding style there. I would talk about it later why I would not do that. But yeah, it's a standard. And unfortunately, the only AI harness that is not using that is Anthropic with Cloud and Code. So what you need to do there is you need to create a Cloud MD file and an AgentsMD file, and then you do system linking. Then yeah, how they say AgentsMD file should look is a code style, PR instructions. There's a huge problem if you try to write everything into the AgentsMD file. And the problem is that you load up your context. So especially if you have a bigger code base and you do many things that are maybe not standard to your project, your first idea would be that you have a 10,000 line of document that describes everything. But the problem is, then you start a session and then you're already into the 50 or 60% limit of your context window. And for most tasks, you also don't need to know how the specific feature works. So that's why it is better. It is better before you have a bad AgentsMD. There are also studies that show that it's better that you don't have any AgentsMD. But there's still a benefit if you have a good AgentsMD. But it's easy to end up with something that is not really useful and also not up to date. So you always have to update this markdown file because it's really important. And what is better? The idea is that instead of having everything into AgentsMD, we use kind of progressive disclosure. So we have our AgentsMD, and then we have our documentation, and then we just tell to the agent, if you want to read more about testing, yeah, look into testing. If you want to understand how our API works, look into that. And then if the agent is starting with this task, it will, and it needs to write a test, it will only look into the testing file. And it will read that and it will put it into its context. So this idea is much, much better than this idea. It's also useful for developers because I'm also always a fan of trying to optimize code, not only for AI agents, but also for developers. But what is also interesting is that most of the time, what is good for a developer is also good for the AI agent. And how this then looks in the end, you have your AgentsMD, and then you do a kind of lazy loading. You only read the gotchas if you really need. You only read the testing if you really need. And in my experience, this works good. But there's a problem on this approach. And the problem is that you need to update the AgentsMD and the documentation all the time. That's why I created a skill. I called it Learn. And if I have a chat and I notice that the agent is doing something stupid, I call this skill. And what it's basically telling the agent is read the current context and think if there is something worth to remember for the future. And then it will come up with a suggestion. And before the agent is asking me, and then I will approve if it makes sense, or if it doesn't make sense, then we'll also say no. But yeah, this is what you need to do manually. You could also do that automatically in a way, but I haven't tried it out yet. Now let's talk about subagents. So subagents in VS Code. They are a tool. So you can see that if you click on the tools and you go to agent, you see that this is a tool. But you can also call it with hashtag, and then you can say run subagent. So I could say do run subagent and tell me which date we have. And then it will not do that in this context, but it will spin up a new agent, kind of, and the main agent will delegate something to the subagent. And you also see that this is how now we see that VS Code is using a subagent, and there's the prompt. And if you see the subagent, you also know that for this task, it was not doing that in this context, and we saved some context. So also with VS Code, if you hover, they have this nice context window, and then you see, okay, at the moment we are at 5%. Or sometimes Copilot, especially on the plan mode, it will do it automatically. That it will use explore subagents to check the code. Now, what are the use cases? The use cases are often that searching for the web, maybe doing something in parallel. Also for long running tasks, you could do test-driven development only with subagents, for example, where one subagent is writing a test that breaks, another subagent is then fixing that, and the last subagent is doing the refactor, and the main agent will just delegate the things. Yeah, this is TDD workflows. And also research, summarize, so you can be creative. Think about if you have a task, you don't want to create a new chat, but you know it would be much better if it run in isolation than say to Copilot, use a subagent to do that. And also to visualize it. So we have here a code base, just a dummy code base with some files. And we ask Copilot how authorization works, for example. And what is the idea here? That Copilot will spin up the explore subagent, and the explore subagent will use grep, and then it will find out that these are the free files related to authorization, and then it will report that to the main agent. And with this approach, especially in a bigger code base, you get much more quality in one chat out of your session. Another idea could be that you want to research a topic, and there you use 3 subagents at the same time. So one subagent is just searching the web in general, the other one is only checking out Reddit, and the last one is looking up your code base. And this is something that I often use in projects that I want to solve a problem, but I have no idea how, but I'm also too lazy to go to Google and search for it. Then I use this technique to get answer out of that. And also in my nano code implementation, I also added this as a tool. And there you see, again, I always want to know how FC Bayern Munich played. I told him, I asked it how FC Bayern played, and then it automatically was using the fetch tool. And under the hood, the fetch tool is using a subagent to do a summarization and reading the resource. Now that we did understand subagents, we will talk about the last practical primitive, skills. So what are skills? So the idea is skills are a combination of markdown files and CLIs and references. So on GitHub, skills you define a skill. And it could just be one markdown file. Now, what is important is that the markdown file also has a description, and the description is what the agent sees in its context. In the description, you tell the model when the skill would be useful. And if it has a match, then it's reading the skill, and then maybe you have a more complex workflow, and then it can lead up references. And you also have resources. And the nice thing about skills is that it's a standard and it works everywhere. It works on Copilot, it works on open code, cloud code, codecs, doesn't matter. This is a standard. And the idea is to give the agent more abilities to do something. But I also believe you will understand skills better once we go into the coding part. But that's the main idea. So I created, for example, one skill for Plausible, which I was using in the past for my blog to track how many visitors I have. And Plausible, they have an API. So what I did is I created a skill and I also created a CLI. And now I can use normal English with Copilot and can ask questions. And this Plausible Insights skill is a bit like my SEO consultant. So this is maybe also interesting that skills are not only useful for coding, they also give you more abilities to do something, not only related to coding. But I also believe that something like VS Code Copilot is not only there for coding. It's just a generic agent that you can use for whatever you want. You can also use it to generate PowerPoint presentations if you want. But the way how this works is with skills. It's always the same. So if you have a specific problem, you know that the agent needs to get more context, you can use skills. So one question was, why is my bounce rate so high on the view posts? And then it first was seeing the description was matching, was loading the skill MD. Then the agent was running my CLI. So with Spun CLI top pages, it gets the top pages back. Agent was also reading the references where I described what makes a good bounce rate. And then it was also fetching the blog posts of mine to read them and to get more context. And in the end, with all these things, with having real data from my blog posts, reading my real blog post, it could give me a good answer. Now, what is the full picture? The full picture is we have these three primitives, I think, and once you understand them, you already can use AI coding tools. Good. You need to start with the agents MD. Don't just use the init that you get from Copilot, because most of the time it's not so either. But I always do is I have written a blog post how to structure a good agents MD file, and I copy paste it to VS Code and say write it in that way. Then we understand how agents work. They're a combination of tools and user requests. In context engineering, we can deal with that with using skills to give the agent more abilities depending on the context, but we can also use sub-agents. Now let's go with the live demo. So if you want to do that, or maybe you also just at the moment you don't have VS Code Copilot, you can also do it later. But what you need is on Mac, we need Node and Python, because we need Python for some skills. This is how you can use it for Windows. So I already installed that. Then also important, you need to enable skills. So this was how it was some months ago. That was still experimental. I think now it's just enabled by default. But if you noticed that what we are doing now doesn't work for you, then you can open VS Code and go to your settings and search for skills and then enable it. Then the first thing is we create our own skill. So how can we create a skill? So this is a fresh project. And if you go to settings, you go to skills, you can click on generate skill. Not this one. Skills. Just click on new skill. And then I say where I want to add the skill. So you see here we have the GitHub skills, agent skills, cloud skills. So VS Code, it will read all of them, but we just use GitHub skills. And then I need to give it a name. This is important. How did I call it? Just hello. So we will go with hello skills, new skill, call it hello. And then you see it was generating a new markdown file for us. We could also do that manually. In the end, you just have to create 3 new folders, but I like that I can just click here and say create new skill. And we copy pasted that from the blog because this is really a stupid skill, but it's like the hello world. So every time a user is writing Alex, it should use the skill. So if I just do hello, no, it's not hello. I need to write Alex. So you see, if I just write hello, it's not doing anything. If I write Alex is a nice name, it should read the skill. Okay, now it was not reading the skill. But yeah, this is how demos work with LLM. What you also always can do is you can always trigger them manually if you do hello. And I say, Alex is a nice name. Then you see it will invoke the skill directly, a bit like a prompt. Yeah, so now it was doing that. Maybe let's try it again. I just say, Alex is a nice name. Okay, why didn't you use the skill that is available? This is what I can also recommend, that if you create a skill and you don't know why it's not invoking it, was not invoking it automatically, you can ask the LLM why is it not doing it. And now it will check the project, and maybe it will tell me that the description was not either. Yeah, so you see, it's finding that, and then it was reading that. I could say improve the description so this won't happen in the future. But yeah, this is also maybe one problem with skills, that it's a bit tricky to have them set up in a way that they're always triggered. Okay, now it did that. Let's see if it would work. Now I do the same. Alex is a nice name. Okay, we're still not using it. Okay, I don't know why it's not working. But you see, you can always trigger them manually with the / command. Maybe I need to open it again. I also have prepared one project where I already did all the things that we want to do. Maybe if I tried it there, then it will invoke the skill. We'll try that. Okay, also not doing. Okay, but yeah, this doesn't matter so much. So sometimes it's not invoking the skill. Most of the time, the reason is that the description is not either. But you see that you need to play with them, and you need to invest some time before your skill is perfect and the description needs to match. But now let's go to another part. There is a nice site from Wachtel called Skills SH. And there you see already many skills that we can use. So there's a front-end design skill, for example, from Anthropic. And in the end, it's just a GitHub file. But with this CLI, we can download the skill on our machine, and it's nicer to share things. So we go to this project, then I will call it. And yeah, for now, I will just, per default, it will put everything into the agent skills. So this is all coding tools that will work. Only Cloud Code needs something different, but I don't want to use Cloud Code now. And then you can either say it should be globally available. So this works for any AI coding tool, that you put the skill in your root, and then for different projects, you can reuse the same skill. If you say you only want to have it under this project, then it will only exist in this project. And then if you go to a different project, then you need to do the same. So there it's a bit more convenient and useful. If you have a skill that you want to use for every project, doesn't matter if it's Vue or Java, then I would recommend to put it into global. But now we put it into project because we also want to see it then here. And then we just say proceed with installation. Also important, they added security because it is just a markdown file, but if you download any skills from the web, you need to read the markdown file because they could use prompt injection. They could write there that they want to read your end files locally, and then you call an API under the hood. And yeah, this is, of course, not so good. I think in practice, this is not happening so often because the models are good, but we still have the huge security problem with prompt injection. And I say yes, and then you see that it was creating an agentsmd file, and we now created a skill creator. So skill creator, it's a skill from Anthropic that basically you can use to create new skills, like a meta skill. So if you look into that, you see the description, create new skills, modify and improve, and so on. You see what this is about, and then it describes that, how the workflow works, how the structure is. You also see that they have many references, for example, here, how the schema looks. They also have something interesting with a way to also test your skills, but I won't talk about that on this workshop. But it's also really interesting with evolves that you can test if the skill works, because the main idea is you only want to have a skill that is really useful and needed, and not something that the model already knows. And yeah, once we have that, we can create new skills. We will do that later. So we installed it. So this how it looks, kind of. We filled out here everything. And now we want to create our own skill. So what is the idea of the skill? Maybe I will talk about that first. The idea is if you go to my website, you see that I have a llms.txt file. This is kind of a mapping of my blog post. And my idea is I want to have a skill and I can ask questions, and the AI should only answer them based on the blog post I have written. And if I have this text, which is automatically generated, but I also wrote a blog post how I generated this thing here with Astro. There the AI has a mapping, and then it can do more things. And this approach you also see on many other documentation sites. And now we have here a prompt that says create a skill that will use, this is my website. Maybe I would just do it, and then I will explain more. So I call that. I hope it will now use the skill that we generated. If not, we need to invoke it manually. But the idea is create a skill that will use our website, and the skill should fetch the content, and it should use a sub-agent command. So this is, I think, which is also important, that before it knows which blog post gave me an answer, it needs to read some of my blog posts, and I don't want to blow up my main agent. That's why you can have a skill. The skill itself is using sub-agents to do something. Okay, nice. Okay, good thing it was now reading the skill that we generated from Anthropic. And yeah, now it's doing the things that Anthropic says. It also creates these eval prompts, and then it will validate the skill itself. So now we have to wait a little bit. Maybe I also, this is the output that I got, I don't know, 2 months ago when I did that, but it can always change. So I don't know how it will generate the skill now. Now I use a different model. I also use a different skill to generate the skill. So this takes a little bit of time. But the idea is always you need a description. The name is also important. So the name needs to match to the folder. I also found out that if the name is View AI Assistant, but the folder itself has a typo, that it will not work. And this is in the end what the model always has in its context. And yeah, this is how it looks. And then I would ask it, how can I test view composables? And then it would see that it will fetch the data. Yeah, it's still working. It will then fetch the data, use a sub-agent, and then it gives me an answer based on the blog post I have written. And this is something that I also used for other documentation. So for Next, for example, they have the same place. So you can create a skill that is doing that, and this works nice. Of course, what you could also do is you could use context 7, if you ever heard about that. So context 7 is they started as a MCP, but now I think they also have a skill. And there the idea is also that the agent can query documentation. And yeah. Now, okay, now it asks me to run Python. Of course, I just say allow. So now I think it will, what is doing, validate if the Python script works. Yeah. And here it is using also a tool that is new in VS Code. They call it memory. So I think the idea is that per project, somewhere they save what you have done there. But yeah, so I did that, run a few agents. Okay, now we should see the skill, and we see a skill MD file. Okay, now much more text in it that I did before. Let's test it. So that's what we generated. Now, last time I just was asking, how can I test view composables? Let's see if it will use my View AI Assistant skill and is getting the data from my blog post. Okay, it's looking up the skills. Yeah, now it reads the skills. Okay, now it, as I was writing it in the skill, it needs to look up this page. I say, yeah, read it. I trust my website. Now it's fetching that. Now it's reading. Yeah, it found the how to test view composable blog post. Perfect. And now it's fetching more data from the blog post. But I think it was not using a sub-agent to do that. So this is a problem. No, now it's using a sub-agent. Okay. Yeah, but maybe my prompt was not enough. I wanted that the whole flow is using a sub-agent all the time. But it was only using the sub-agent now to read the blog. Okay, now it wants to read even more blog posts. Yeah, but now you already see, we saw some problems with my skill. It was reading too many blog posts. The answer was already in my how to test view composables. The whole process is now too slow, but this is how you fine tune your skills. You start with your skill, you look how the process works, and then it got an answer. Now, what I often do is you wasted too much time to give me an answer. Also, you should have only used one sub-agent. How can you improve the skill? So now I know that in this context, I don't like how this was working, but I can improve it. So now it's my responsibility as an engineer to improve the process. And yeah, then I hopefully it will update the markdown, and then I will read it. And then what I need to do the next, I create a new chat and do it again. And yeah, for a complex workflow with this approach, you maybe can spend some hours to really optimize it. But the good thing is, once you have a skill that is working perfectly for a use case, in the future, you save so much time. So the 4 hours that you wasted to optimize the skill, they are definitely worth it. Yeah, I will stop for now, but I hope you get the idea. Yeah, also one thing, maybe a bonus is I like the Ask Questions tool that VS Code implemented some months ago. So here I tell it, help me to create a workout tracking app, use the Ask Questions tool to find out how the tech spec should be. So now it will, yeah, this is so nice. It will use a UI to ask me questions about my problem. So here we want to build a web app. Of course, we want to use Vue because I like Vue. Now, what do we want to use? I want to use JS. Look that up later. And then it asks me which kind of login do we want. JS, the local first database has something for me. And then which features have been in the first version? Yeah, rest timer. Sounds good. And we want to have an MVP. So this Ask User tool, it helps you to do something. I often use that with the idea of spec-driven development, that I get a ticket, Jira ticket, and I convert it into a technical ticket. And then I tell the AI to ask me questions about it. And then I always say, use the Ask User tool. So this saves you so much time when you do planning, researching, that you have this nice UI and can click around. So I really like that. I can recommend that. Yeah, also the idea with sub-agents, that you can do it in parallel. So here I say run sub-agent as the tool. I could maybe also just say, I don't even need to mention the tool. I think if I would just say run 3 sub-agents, it would also work. And here the idea is, because I live in Geretsried, it should use 3 sub-agents and do a web research. So maybe one agent is looking up Wikipedia. The other agent is looking up, I don't know, YouTube. And yeah, now you see here we do 3 sub-agents call at the same time. One agent is looking up the history. I need to, maybe I can try out something more dangerous here. Bypass approval, yes, and not this one. Copy paste prompt again. So now we just bypass the green and yellow mode. Why not? So it's the same prompt, because otherwise for every website the Copilot would fetch, I would to say, okay, allowed, you can read that. And I think this is something newer that, yeah, here you can run a session in yellow mode. Now it will do the same. You also see this is the prompt that we got. So yeah, here it's also using the newer browser mode. It's calling the website exactly. I don't like that. I don't want to see how it's looking up the internet, but yeah. But I hope you get the main idea that we can not only run one sub-agent at the same time, but we can run multiple sub-agents. Yeah, then we would, but maybe I would just show it because we run a bit out of time. There's also an Excalibur skill, which is nice. So the idea is Excalibur, where is it here? Draw Psyduck. So Psyduck is a Pokemon. The idea is that Excalibur is a website where you can draw things. And this robot was created by Copilot. So in the end, it's a JSON. So there's an extension called Excalibur. So you need to install that. And then you see this drawn element. And this is really nice because for all the diagrams that you saw on my presentation, I was just using a prompt and generated it. So I was also describing it my brand colors. But this is also a nice way where you can save time not only for coding, but also for presentation. So here it's trying to generate a Psyduck diagram. It is also always using a sub-agent. So the skill in the end is, if you read that up, you see here that here this is important. The main agent never reads Excalibur files directly, always delegate to a sub-agent, because this JSON file will be huge. And the interesting thing about the skill is that it is writing so much how Excalibur works. I think the models, they just know how Excalibur works. But you can also improve that. I also saw Excalibur skills where they described how a rectangle looks and so on. Yeah, then it's running and still running, but let's see if what the other agent is doing. Okay, now the agent is done. So it was reading many things about it. It was, yeah, describing and was telling it the name is old, the modern, etc. Yeah, also some things regarding Gertseed. And now it also asks me follow-up questions. But you also see now what I'm doing is also in this presentation, I need to work on multiple things at the same time because I don't want to wait for one agent. And I don't know, maybe you can write it in the chat how many agents you are able to coordinate at the same time. But I think my limit is, I don't know, 3 or 4. And yeah. And yeah, we get a robot. So this is Excalibur skill. And there are also much more skills. But before we go to the summary, I also want to explain this walkthrough skill that I use for learning. So the idea is that if you want to know how my blog works, I got a skill that was generating this index HTML for me. And then here you see how it works. So this is the starting point and so on. And this is just a skill. So if you want to use the skill, can also post it in the chat later. You can download it, and then you can use that for any problem you have. Maybe you onboard in a new project, and you can type /walkthrough, and then you ask how does authorization works. And then you get this index HTML, which is using Mehmet under the hood, but you can also click here. So this overview describes how the skill itself works. So we have a skill MD file, then we have some HTML patterns there, and then you also see it's using multiple sub-agents. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of this idea. And yeah, but this is the main point also for my presentation, that you need to customize your workflow. So I believe vibe coding doesn't work, but AI engineering works, but you need to optimize your workflows. Every time you do something manually, maybe you can use a skill and optimize it. Yeah, so the core takeaways are agents is simple, just the LLM just running in a loop with tools. Context is important. And then we have the free primitives that if you want to get good with AI coding, you should master agents, MD, sub-agent, and skills. There's also something newer, hooks, but just saying, and probably in 2 or 3 months, there will be even more new things. But so far, I think agents, MD, sub-agent, skills, they are kind of stable. At last, over the last 3 or 4 months, but who knows if they're still relevant in 1 year. So yeah, I hope the talk was interesting for you. You can look it up. If you have any questions, just write me, and I will hand back to Alex.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was a great presentation. And we bring also Matthias back to the stage. And perhaps for some questions, there was one question about how do we structure instructions, assets, and tools outputs to minimize context window. Because if you have a huge context window, you spend a lot of money.
Yeah, that's why for coding, the idea is to make the task not too big. That's one idea. Another idea is also, if you heard about the Ralph idea, that you have a ticket with 5 ACs. You can use the Copilot SDK, and with Shell, you then for each AC, you run that in a new context. This helps with that, but regarding money, it will be still expensive, because if you want to create a solver ticket that will run 2 or for 3 hours, then it could be that you still have to pay much tokens. So I think if you, that there's no way to say I don't want to spend any money if I want to go the AI coding direction and try to optimize everything.
So I think that is a challenge somehow to know what is the great amount of context you need. So if you want to limit this one.
Yeah, and also know where it is worth. And also maybe one tip, spend more time on the planning phase. If you have a ticket or an idea for a feature, spend now much more time on the planning, because once you give the plan or the ticket to an agent, then it's already kind of too late. And then it could be that you let it run for 3 hours, but then you find out my plan was not making any sense, and then you lose definitely money. So spend more time. You use the Ask User tool to brainstorm once you have a plan, that everything is clear. This is really helpful. But maybe you spend then 20 minutes only on the plan phase, but in the end, it will save you much more time.
I think that it's also the same as Matthias was saying earlier. If you have something to say it in front, then argue how to correct the direction if you're going for 3 hours in the wrong direction somehow.
Yeah.
What is about you, Matthias? What would you say about the context content window if you are working on the right context? As on your demo, it was something on ask. Then you were putting questions to the code, and then you're going for the agent. From my experience, it depends on your project somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going for the ask mode, of course, then your point, the context is only what you see there. But if you're going for the big complex project, you can ask anything. So it's in the agent mode. You are just asking, okay, do me something, and it see the whole project from your side, and start creating code.
Yeah, so yeah, basically, I mean, there are a couple of ways you can reduce the context window. One thing is that you can sort of blacklist specific directories that you don't want to have included, but if they are referenced from somewhere else, they can still be like put in. So if you have like sensitive personal data in a directory that is called /sensitive or something like this, it can still be read if it's referenced from somewhere else.
Okay.
Another idea is how many agents you use. So for instance, if you have a task and you're trying to find a specific place in the code where the changes should be applied, maybe this is not a task for the main agent, but for a sub agent that finds it and then gives the result back to the main agent. Other than that, I mean, compacting is a feature that I think works really well in terms of that when the context window is reaching its limit, that the that some stuff is, or some details is thrown out and just the summary lives on. I think that the feature is that you actually create a new thread and that is being recreated with the summary from the previous one. And there is also, what's the third thing? Depending on how many tools or MCP servers you add in, the context window also grows big. For instance, the GitHub MCP server has a lot of endpoints, so I think it's like 50,000 tokens. And a colleague of mine, he wrote a custom MCP server that is sitting in front of another MCP server, so that the main context is not being polluted by all the descriptions from the other agent. So this was his creative way to solve the problem. But I hope that there are going to be more features that are actually built in terms of not polluting the context. And I think sub-agents are the best way to tackle it. But it's always going to be like a fight from the tools. For instance, the GitHub team, they just put in all the API methods into this big tool, and I don't think that 50,000 tokens for a description of the tools is the right way to do it. But it will balance it out. For instance, that there will be a new feature that will pollute the context. The team of GitHub is working to some reduces, and we will see what the future holds. But it definitely helps that the context is growing, but you still need to repeat some of the commands, or some commands can still be lost. For instance, I have this custom skill that I can't run in VS, but in VS Code for database migrations. And where I say don't create an entity framework core migration yourself because you fail, and I gave it some steps to do it. But if the context window gets too long, then GitHub Copilot might forget that I have this skill, and then I say, what are you doing? Please revert all the changes, use this explicit skill, and I give the path to the skill, and then it works again. So compacting and having a big context and remembering what the important parts in the context is, that's definitely challenging, yeah.
So if we have enough skills then on GitHub Copilot, we are done. we didn't need just to call them. Is it right? Is the amount of tools is our solution?
Well, it took me, I think, 3 months. No, I think it was 5 months
Longer.
of working with GitHub Copilot to come up with the first skill that actually is something that is a repetitive task that I can't, where I need some external tool. The second skill that I wrote, I think it was 1 week later, was that I had a custom translation system where I had like some text files and a Python script that creates an SQL statement with update statements, and then translations are being put into this update script. This is these are the only 2 skills that I've written myself, because I don't see these repetitive tasks that need external resources like Python scripts and so on, at least in where I'm programming. Maybe I'm doing too simple web applications. But yeah, I mean, I think there is this one page. Let me look up the link. This is like NPM for skills. How was it called again? Give me 5 seconds.
But
Agent Packet Manager. I think this was released last week. github.com/Microsoft/APM. I think this is going to be like NPM for agents and skills.
I just compare this one to the agent. If you're going for Foundry, for example, you have a lot of connections. You have a lot of tools that you can use. Right now, you can use Foundry IQ as a search to provide everything what you want as a knowledge, and then using all of the tools that you can call from there to get the job done somehow. And the amount of these, I think it will be more. But for my question was just, it depends. You can use GitHub Copilot, of course, on your own project just with one skill. If it's something you call the whole time, you can use it completely without. It depends. Alex was saying a lot of different things there. If you have a really great complex project somehow, what do you think would be the great amount of, or what would break a great project somehow if you do a lot of AI there? What is the limit right now from your side?
I think the first thing that you need to do is, if you have a brown bag project, you need to use AI to have tests, linting, go with monolith approach. This helps. But once, if you have a good state, a good code base, and you have a good workflow with skills like also refactoring code. So you use AI to implement a feature, then you create a new chat, and then you do a review and refactor it. Once you have this process going on, then it works for huge code bases. So it works also really good. You can also then combine it with Copilot and let it auto review it. So after the last 2 or 3 months, I don't see the problem anymore for huge code bases, to be honest. But you need to have a code base that has tests, which is really clean. If you have a messy code base, it would also be hard for a developer. It's maybe a developer who's there for 2 or 3 years. He can still navigate there, but we all know those projects where you have one file and one comment and someone's writing, "Don't touch this file." And, but if you have this project, then AI also can't help you. But you can use AI to write now better code and also do the things where we always said we don't have time. We can do refactorings. So I think we should slow ourselves down and use AI also to write more tests, to refactoring, not only to use a ticket and copy paste it and say edit, because you do that, you end up with a messy code fast. You need to still slow down and do the best practices. And then it works. And it's why I like skills so much is that you can mimic your workflow. So and you can have a skill for the plan mode. So all these spec-driven development frameworks, in the end, they just use skills, and then you define your workflow. You can also have a debug skill that is getting your logs. If you use Sentry, for example, it's just an API, and then you get information about your logs, and then you can do debugging now easier.
I like the idea of what you're saying. You can just, as a junior, as a senior, whatever, you can just get your code quicker. You can refactor then, of course, test. We have already discussed this one at the beginning, but also refactor the code that you created already. Just going from the legacy code, enhance also your learnings, and also learning by doing. as you were running perhaps also developer workshops, or only on Azure infrastructure workshop. This is learning by doing. You see the new task, then you create something that you can also just abstract this one also to coding with GitHub Copilot. Yeah, you can create, you can then refactor, you can learn, you can explain. So it can do anything. If we were doing now programming right now, and Matthias is writing, and we are doing pair programming, whatever, just sitting there and just mention, okay, is it going right or wrong? Should we add more classes or write spaghetti code, whatever? This is something like someone would be in your room and helping you to get this project done. And of course, if you have complex project that the maze still bad data or code base, okay, there's a lot of projects there that have bad code base somehow, and TI would also struggle because the data is not great somehow. I want to work on this one, but also as a web developer, I would struggle. I need to fix this first, and then I can go with further implementations. And I think that it is also the same for GitHub Copilot, also for everything on the AI tools, whatever. If you have bad code and then you say explain, we got bad documentation somehow. But also perhaps this is something from the humans that we don't see the errors that quick as AI is doing this, because it compares to design patterns. Also, that is a great question, because we were talking about students. I can explain or also see others any patterns in this code, and how would I implement patterns? You see, hey, create me MVC, whatever. It creates a model view controller. That's it. Just from the position, if you want to create this structure on your own without coding, you need time, and you get this one in seconds. And then you can go for your views, you can go for your models, whatever, and you are quicker on this. And also explain to the junior developers what I was also struggling on, the discussion that the AI eliminates the juniors completely somehow, because they use AI and now they are seniors. That's not true. That would happen.
Yeah, there's still like some experience that seniors
there
have.
are also social skills related to senior, in my opinion. But yeah.
Knowledge, experience, social skills, whatever. You have missed all of these things. Just to realize from your experience if it's a right code or not. I like the discussion, guys. Really cool. Thank you for your time. We are right on time to end this session from 3 hours. That was a great live coding session also. Thank you very much, Matthias and Alex. And see you soon in a bit. That was it from the Global AI community today. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks for having us. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.